Panie I Panowie, witam serdecznie. Good morning to those in the United States. Good day to everyone in Europe who is watching this. And I'm Dan Fried. I've been in Poland for so many years. I used to have hair when I first arrived. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this event with my friend and esteemed colleague, Georgette Mosbacher, who did great work in Poland, carrying on the tradition of U.S. ambassadors doing their best. We're here because the Atlantic Council is reopening its Warsaw office. That's what we're here to do, and I am here to present a number of speakers from Poland to welcome the office, starting with Izabela Antos, then Marcin Przydacz from the Foreign Ministry, Mayor Trzaskowski, great to have you, and Marek Brzezinski, the son of my former professor, who is as strict a professor as perhaps he was a father, though that's another discussion. And of course, a panel of experts to discuss the current situation. The Atlantic Council is making an investment in Poland at a time of danger for Europe. There is a war in the East. This is a serious moment, and we are here as Americans and as the Atlantic Council because Poland counts. You are on the frontier of war and the front helping advance and protect freedom in Europe. Georgette, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Georgette Mosbacher. I'm a board director of the Atlantic Council, also co-director of the 3Cs initiative with General Jones. As Ambassador Fried so eloquently just said, we're honored to host this opening event of the Atlantic Council's Warsaw office. This has been something we've been working on. And thanks to, I won't repeat it, but thanks to several people in the audience, this Warsaw office is going to be open. They will be recognized later, but if it weren't for them, and what I think is important to make the point, this is supported by Poles. This office is supported by Poles, not just Americans. This office will serve as the hub for further ramping up the Council's work in advancing U.S. and EU cooperation. It will also serve as a key base for Atlantic Council experts supporting Ukraine's resistance against Russia's continued invasion. The Atlantic Council has been deeply engaged in U.S.-Polish affairs for years, but there is no substitute for having a physical presence in Warsaw. And that is what this is about today. So, Dan?
The announcement we have is that Aaron Korewa, a son of Poland and the United States alike, and thereby embodying in one person our Polish-American alliance, is to be the director of this office. This is his first event. I also want to thank Georgette Mosbacher was right. This office is supported by Poles. And I want to thank all of our Polish supporters who've made this work possible. The investment in Polish-American relations is important for both our countries. It is being put to a test now in Putin's war in the East, and we are here. And I want to thank all of our Polish supporters. I also want to give thanks to the Americans, the staff of the Atlantic Council who have made this possible. Fred Kemp, our president and CEO, who covered Poland during the Solidarity Days. He knows it well. Ben Haddad, who is actually French, who can't be here because he's running for parliament in France. I don't think I was supposed to say that, but it's public knowledge. You know, Ian Brzezinski, the brother of someone, Ambassador Mosbacher, but also Treiher, Denise Forsthuber, who has made this actually happen, like she makes everything
happen. Denise.
Safa Shawan Edwards, Jorn Fleck, the people at the Atlantic Council who make the work. Look, I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. Poland is on the frontier of war. Putin is trying to destroy the united Europe that Poles, of which Poles and Americans are the co-authors. I'm thinking of Polish efforts to overthrow communism, Solidarity's victory, Poland's drive to enter NATO supported by the United States, and Poland's drive to integrate Europe by joining the European Union. This was a great strategic success. Putin challenges it through war, violence, murder, deportations. The Ukrainians are fighting, and we are helping them resist Putin's armies. This is serious business. That's what we're going to be doing here. Serious. Now it is my privilege to welcome to the stage Pani Izabela Antos from the Prime Minister's office. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, for the last 30 years we have lived in a world where questions about security have been replaced by questions about development. The post-Cold War era had its own problems, but the West believed money could buy everything, including peace. Perhaps for the first time in history, there was hope that history would have a happy ending. Gandhi once said that he was an irresponsible optimist, but he always based his optimism on hard facts. Unfortunately, the optimism of the West was not grounded on facts, but on wishful faith. The war in Ukraine has changed everything. We cannot lose faith that peace is possible. But we must understand that peace requires effort. That is why we need to rebuild the security architecture of the West, so that we can defend freedom against those who seek to threaten it. What can we learn from the war in Ukraine? First, Russian aggression has made it clear that transatlantic cooperation is the bedrock of European security. We, as a transatlantic community, were able to respond swiftly and in a coordinated manner thanks to US leadership. Our collective reaction to the war in Ukraine has proved that the transatlantic bond is strong. It is the collective effort and steadfast commitment of the United States, Canada, and European nations to the defense of allied territory that render NATO a zone of peace and stability. Second, hard power matters. The war in Ukraine is a wake-up call to all countries. The US has once again proved that it is committed to safeguarding peace and stability of the European continent. Along with other NATO allies, the US stepped up its military presence on the eastern flank, providing critical capabilities to reinforce the deterrence and defense posture of NATO borders. It is imperative that an allied posture and American presence be further bolstered regardless of how the war ends, so as to deny any potential venturing by Russia into the allied territory. And we, Europeans, have the increase of our defense spending to take more responsibility for our own security within NATO. Third, close cooperation among NATO allies, the US and Poland especially, was and still remains crucial in mounting an adequate response to Russia's savage assault on Ukraine and countering it with all available means, barring direct involvement in the conflict. Fourth, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a direct assault on the international rules-based order and on our values. All the countries that cherish freedom and peace must not remain indifferent to unjustified and unprovoked atrocities that Russia is coming against Ukraine. We, the collective West, must be in for a long haul. What we need is more transatlantic cooperation to maintain the monument and sustain efforts at increasing costs for Russia and insulting it in the international fora, as well as providing military assistance to Ukraine so that Kiev may effectively exercise its lawful right to self-defense. Nearly 8 years ago, the West defended itself against the evil of fascism. Unfortunately, the policy of evil was not completely destroyed. It was still alive, and Vladimir Putin awakens the demons of totalitarianism anew. Fortunately, it's up to us to win the battle. What happened in Bucha, Irpin, or Mariupol may be either a harbinger of the end of our civilization and the beginning of the end of Putin's Russia. I believe that when we act together, we are stronger than any enemy. We can still be optimistic about the future as long as we base our optimism on the actions and values which created the Western world. I would like to thank everyone present at today's meeting. Each of you is an architect of a renewed alliance between Poland and the United States, between Europe and America. I am sure your voice will resonate strongly in designing a better future for the entire Western world. I look forward with great hope to results of your deliberations. Kind regards, Mateusz Morawiecki, Prime Minister of Poland.
That was great. That was terrific. I wish it didn't have to be said, right? I take no pleasure in the Prime Minister being spot on right. Panie Marcinie, Panie Ministrze, zapraszam.
Mr. Ambassador, former ambassadors, Minister, Mr. Mayor, what a great day. Atlantic Council office is somehow back to Warsaw. It's been already a couple of years since Michał Kobosko, who is somewhere here, left his office. Is it like 7 years? But finally we got it. We got the Atlantic office and the great director back here to Warsaw. And it is, as I said, beautiful day in this spring. I mean, the world needs transatlanticism, and down here in Poland, as the most pro-Atlantic country in Europe, we should have this office. We should work on this. And thank you very much for having me, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here and to participate in this event. As I said, the Atlantic Council has always been a true and dedicated partner of Poland, but also of the larger transatlantic community, an eager advocate of even deeper cooperation between Europe and North America. Needless to say, in such dire times and challenging geopolitical circumstances, the necessity for greater transatlantic cooperation should be rather obvious. I want to thank the Atlantic Council for being part of this. Dear friends, the Russian aggression on Ukraine is without any doubt the most dangerous security crisis of the 21st century. From the very first day of war, Poland, just like the United States, has advocated for the European Union and other like-minded countries to impose and subsequently strengthen multiple sanctions on Russia until it suspends the invasion and withdraws all its military forces from the territory of Ukraine. In our view, Russia should be isolated, politically, economically, diplomatically. This is achievable when we speak in one voice. And I believe that this is also a job not only for diplomats, but also for think tankers. There is no room for hesitation or self-interest. We should make Russia pay heavy price for its crimes and atrocities. In 2008, and again in 2014, regretfully, Russia did not bear any consequences of its aggressive and unprovoked actions. If we repeat this mistake once again, I'm afraid we will risk much larger. Russia has to be contained yet again. It needs to be understood once and for all that since the late February, Ukraine has been defending as much its own land, sovereignty and people as the universal values of democracy and liberty, the values which really unite us on both sides of the Atlantic. I cannot stress this more. Ukraine is fighting this war not only for its own sake, but also for our security. That is why Poland and the US and the transatlantic community have this values-driven imperative to support Ukraine in any available manner driven by 4S: support, solidarity, supplies, and sanctions. I could elaborate a bit more on this, but for the sake of time, I will just repeat that Poland has been very much hardly working on all of those actions. You know that we do have as we call it, multi-purpose humanitarian hub in Rzeszów, delivering all the needs which are very much needed by Ukraine with the great support of our American friends. And I mean, of course, the humanitarian supplies you are providing, but also securing not only Ukraine, but also eastern flank, having also your troops and equipment down here on the Polish war. The war in Ukraine turns out to be a wake-up call to all countries, especially those who, lulled by peace dividend, were lagging in their defense spending. The US has once again proved that it is committed to safeguarding peace and stability on the European continent. Along with other NATO allies, the US stepped up its military presence on the eastern flank, providing critical capabilities to reinforce the deterrence and defense posture of NATO border. It is imperative that allied posture and American presence be further bolstered, just like Prime Minister said in his letter, regardless of how the war ends, so as to deny any potential venturing by Russia into the Allied territory. And we, the Europeans, have to step up our defense spending to take more responsibility for our own security within NATO. And Poland could be a great example with regard to that. We are already spending 2% of our GDP for defense, and since the beginning of the next year, we'll be spending even more. Again, I could say a few words about our energy cooperation, about our trade, which is doing very well, but I've put a full stop here. What I can assure you that I will be able to keep listing all these arguments, facts, and ideas regarding transatlanticism and Polish-American relations for hours. There was still in precious time of other speakers. Let me, however, stop right there to reiterate my core message. Drawing from our past experience and present occurrences, the transatlantic cooperation is the bedrock of European security and great hope for the fighting Ukraine, and as such shall be maintained no matter what. On a cheeky and witty end now, it is my sincere hope that the new permanent presence of the Atlantic Council here in Warsaw will have a positive spillover effect on other permanent presence of the United States in Poland. Thank you very much.
Well argued. Za waszą i naszą wolność. Podsumowanie. Mr. Mayor, thank you for hosting us. The floor is yours.
Hello. First of all, welcome to Warsaw, the most vibrant and dynamic city in the region. And of course, we're here to announce the good news. We're here to announce that the Atlantic Council is back in Warsaw, and that's great. And of course, in the times of need, we need friends. We need support. And the words of the American President Joe Biden that the United States of America will defend every inch of NATO territory is of fundamental importance to us all, because it allows us to work in peace and to concentrate on helping our Ukrainian sisters and brothers in times of need. But of course, the presence of American companies here on the ground who are investing in those difficult times, such as the news that were announced by Google, that it is investing in Warsaw in such difficult times, allows us to project stability, calmness, and peace. But of course, Poland and Warsaw need support in this time of need. We need military support, we need financial support, but we also need intellectual support. And that's why I welcome the decision of the Atlantic Council to come back to Warsaw and to also help us on that front. And only through those combined efforts, we can project the feeling of stability, because we have the most important security guarantees of our American and European partners, but we also have visible signs that attest to the seriousness of our partners when it comes to coming in times of crisis, coming with assistance to Poland, one of its staunchest allies. And of course, the times are difficult. I remember that at the beginning of my mandate, people were telling me that, I could finally focus on the future, on building of a strong and dynamic city. And boom, we had some problems related to a sewer pipe under the river. We thought that was a calamity. But just after that, we had to deal with one of the greatest pandemics of our era. And just as we are getting out of it, suddenly we have a border that is on fire. We have a conflict on our eastern border. We have an aggressor which is attacking with all its viciousness a peaceful nation of Ukraine. Warsaw is there to help. Poland is there to help. We have accepted 300,000 refugees to Warsaw alone in a matter of a month. And just to give you the order of magnitude, when we had a problem with refugees on the Mediterranean in 2015-16, and you remember the panic, you remember how unprepared we were for it as the European Union. We had 200,000 people coming to Europe in a month at a peak, and we have 300,000 people coming to one city alone. The Ukrainians are fighting for our freedom, but they're not only fighting for the freedom of Ukraine, for the sovereignty of Ukraine, for the territorial integrity of Ukraine, but they're also fighting for our freedom, and not only for the freedom of Poland, but for the freedom of all the countries in Europe and for the stability of the transatlantic relations. And this is very, very important to say. And that's why everyone who works on strengthening that stability is doing its own bid to actually fight and help in preserving peace on the continent. We need all to step up. We all need to do our bid, and this is happening in the city which is now on the front line of the help in resolving one of the biggest challenges that are before us, and I would submit to you, one of the biggest challenges in Europe after the Second World War. So this is immensely important that we put our heads together and we work together, because as I've said, military and financial support are incredibly needed, but of course the intellectual efforts are going to underpin our strategy for the future. And Poland, right now, needs to be the strongest democracy ever in the time of need, because we cannot afford the weakest link on the eastern flank. And I know the work done by Atlantic Council when it comes to helping us with coming up with the right strategy, with the right tools, with the right decisions, but also as a place where people can meet, regardless of their differences, and talk about how to strengthen democracy and how to strengthen the values for which The Ukrainians are now fighting and sometimes giving their life. We all need to step up, and that's exactly what we're doing. So thank you very much for everyone involved, for everyone ready to make that very significant decisions. And thank you very much for Atlantic Council for being back in Warsaw. I hope that you are going to contribute. I hope that you are going to help us in establishing the right strategy. I hope you will be the place in which discussions can be held, in which brainstorming can be done, regardless of our political differences. And that's exactly what we need in our beautiful and fantastic city of Warsaw, which is happy to welcome you back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was great. Zrobimy co możemy. And it is my pleasure to invite, zapraszam pana ambasadora Marka Brzezińskiego do zbierania głosów.
Good afternoon. Let me start by simply saying what an honor it is to stand with our moderators, Ambassador Mosbacher and Ambassador Fried, in a powerful display of US-Polish friendship. They were such consequential ambassadors to Poland. Ambassador Fried helped bring Poland into NATO. Ambassador Mosbacher helped bring Poland into the visa waiver program. Imagine Poland today during this crisis as not a member of NATO or not a member of the visa waiver program. That wouldn't be good. Thank you. The relaunch of the Atlantic Council's office in Warsaw comes at a historic moment for Europe and the transatlantic relationship. We are being tested, and Poland is under threat. Russian aggression to the east is a reminder that democracy and peace are values that must be fought for and must be protected together. It is more important than ever to strengthen diplomatic bonds and ensure united, coordinated responses to Russia's aggression. The Atlantic Council's office opening builds on more than a decade of this prominent think tank's presence in Poland. It shows its commitment to advancing US-Polish cooperation and to raising Central and East European voices in Europe and in the transatlantic dialogue. The Atlantic Council's commitment to the vision of a Europe undivided, free, and secure has been a defining feature of the Atlantic Council's role in transatlantic security. The Atlantic Council was among the first institutions to highlight the collision between democracy and autocracy as a defining feature of our time. Its work on energy diversification, transatlantic financial investment, and the 3 Cs initiative have boosted resiliency and integration in Central and Eastern Europe. Its influential work on NATO profoundly contributed to, if not helped shape, the discussions and decision-making that led to today's US and allied force posture in Central and Eastern Europe. Folks, we're in Poland at a time when there are 12,600 American soldiers all on Polish bases. Abrams, HIMARS, F-35s, Patriots are either here and or on the way. The Atlantic Council's work on Poland goes back 3 decades, including the office it ran in Warsaw, led by Michał Kobosko for many years. Its new office is a strategic commitment to further strengthening transatlantic security. The undertakings I have described are of vital importance to allow NATO to stand united in the face of Russian aggression. And I want to add the following. In April 2021, Dan Fried and Ash Jane pushed for a new Atlantic Charter aimed at bolstering democratic institutions. Just 2 months later, President Biden and Prime Minister Johnson signed the new charter based upon Dan and Ash's recommendations. Included in the charter was a commitment to the shared responsibility for collective security, a promise that NATO allies will always be able to count on the US and the UK. The United States takes this commitment very seriously, particularly at this moment when NATO's neighbors and partners are under attack. The world has seen Poland serving as a leader in NATO, an influential member of the European Union, and a caring and supportive neighbor to Ukraine. Poland's voice, calling for support of Ukraine, has been clear and strong. Poland's government, civil society, and everyday citizens have acted with determination. I have taken to referring to Poland as a humanitarian superpower for the incredibly inspiring role the Polish people have played in this crisis. The Poles who have driven to the border, worked at the railway station, opened their homes. They are our heroes. Oni są naszymi bohaterami. The Atlantic Council has the mission of shaping the global future together. And now, with the Atlantic Council's commitment to a permanent presence in Warsaw, Poland, Poland will have a dedicated forum for bringing together leaders from the United States and Poland to discuss shared visions for the future. Building on the Atlantic Council's vast network, this office will have local roots and global reach, sharing policy insights around the world and cementing Poland's place as a leader shaping the future of transatlantic security. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. At this hour, I would like to welcome our distinguished panel up on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, everybody joining us virtually, very quickly as the appointed director of the Warsaw office, how very happy I am to be here. This war that's happening right now is one of, if not the most consequential event of our lifetime, definitely the most consequential war of our lifetime. And as we heard today, people in Poland understand that. And that gives me great optimism. Because if there's one thing I believe about Poland is that this country is at its best when it's on a mission. And incidentally, this is something that it shares with the United States. So, without further ado, I would like to turn to our panel to discuss these important matters. We have with us today Ambassador Dan Fried, who needs no further introduction, I believe. We also have Ambassador Georgette Mosbacher, who probably doesn't need any further introduction either, in the interest of speeding things up, right? We're good. We also have Dr. Katarzyna Pisarska, who is the chair of the Warsaw Security Forum and the chairwoman of the Council of the Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation. Welcome. And finally, Marta Poślad, who is the director of Central and Eastern European and Transatlantic Public Policy, hope I got all that right, from Google, and one of our great partners here at the Atlantic Council. Welcome, everybody. Let's get to it. There's a lot for us to discuss. Ambassador Fried, let me start with you. So, please elaborate. What is the US-Poland relationship about, and what can be done? What is the significance of this relationship, in your words?
It's a wartime alliance, and I wish it weren't, but it is. It is a wartime alliance. There is a war in the East, Putin's war of conquest, and it's a war we want to help the Ukrainians win. The war aim of the Ukrainians is to preserve their independence, their sovereignty, their democracy. The United States and Poland want to preserve the great achievement of a Europe whole, free, and at peace, including Poland, and to open the doors for that Europe to include Ukraine. That's what this is about. And we don't know how that war will end. Russia attacks Ukraine, and we don't know who will win, which is pretty astonishing if you think about it. I'm not saying the Ukrainians will inevitably win. I'm saying that they have a reasonable chance of success. And in that chance, that possibility gives us commensurate responsibilities to help them. We can't screw this up. That's what the Polish-American alliance is about right now. As Mayor Trzaskowski said, yes, for common values. And Minister Przydacz said the same thing. We can't screw this up. It's a wartime alliance. My sense is that President Biden understands this deeply in his bones. He is, as I said in Tallinn the other day, the center-left version of Ronald Reagan. That's a good thing, right? That's what this is about.
Thanks. And on those, in the interest of not screwing things up, I will therefore turn to Georgette and ask you a similar question. So what would you say is the significance of the U.S.-Poland alliance as a pillar in the transatlantic community?
You know, I get that question a lot, and I'm always think about the fact that people want to hear some very intellectual answer to that. But it's really simple, and it's obvious. It was obvious to me when I came. It's obvious today, and that is Poland is the eastern flank of NATO. It is the gateway for China into Western Europe. It is the leader in Central Eastern Europe. And Poland has been out front in the major issues that, for some of us, we could not understand why the EU didn't understand them, but Poland did. And that is, energy is national security. Poland out front in making that transition. Right now, making every effort to get nuclear, civilian nuclear. LNG. When Russia turned off the gas to Poland a couple of weeks ago, Poland didn't have to panic because Poland had already made the arrangements and was forward-thinking, so it has enough gas so it won't be freezing. You won't be freezing in the dark like some of your neighbors come winter. So to me, for the United States, it is imperative that Poland be strong and free, if for no other reason than to push back on China's Belt and Road. That's why the 3 Cs initiative is so important, why we've mounted the 3C initiative. Poland was really at the front of creating the 3 Cs initiative. And this gives us an opportunity, with Poland's leadership, for Central Eastern Europe to take its rightful place in the EU and in the security architecture.
Thank you. Katarzyna, let me turn to you, going back to the war again, because this is one of the most important subjects we will ever discuss. So, I mean, what we see, what Russia is doing right now in Ukraine, it somehow comes from like the deepest, the darkest corners of the 1930s. But we just heard some member of the Russian Duma say that Poland is next in line for denazification. there is, what they shut off the gas. There is, I just listened this morning on someone talking about how the Russians claim that now the Poles are in Ukraine, leading the Ukrainians on, and they're giving them black vodka that is some sort of narcotics and God knows what. So, okay, we can laugh at this, but at the same time, what is the nature of the Russian threat to Poland, and how is Poland preparing for this? What do you say about that?
Thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you for the invitation to the Atlantic Council. Again, great congratulations to you for reopening the office. Well, Aaron, I say this with not a light heart, but the nature of the Russian threat for Poland is existential. It is existential as much as it is existential for Ukraine, because the strategy of Russia, the ultimate strategy when it comes to not only Eastern Europe, not only the post-Soviet space, but also Central Europe is the same. Total and complete domination of this region to Russia. And had the brave Ukrainians not stopped the Russians 80 days ago, I think we would be very fearful of a potential conventional war with Russia. Had Russia been less corrupt, the army would be better modernized. Had we had, less luck than we had, I think we would be seeing, the kind of concerns that today, again, thanks to the fact that the war is being led by the Ukrainians and fought on their ground, we don't have to think. But that doesn't mean Russia is less of a threat. It will use different tactics of the subordination, if necessary, by neutralizing political ability of Poland to project power, to project our ideas into the European Union, into NATO. But most importantly, I think, one thing that Russians truly fear is that both the Ukrainians and Poles and the Baltics truly understand not only the nature of the threat, but Russia itself. And we have a lot of great people here and experts from Warsaw, but we also have people listening from across the Atlantic. And I think these assumptions that the Poles and Ukrainians have about Russia have to be again and again repeated. And there's basically 3 assumptions about the regime that you need to understand in order to win this war. Number 1, Russian society continues to support the war in Ukraine and will continue even when it's directly faced with the atrocities. So hoping, as many countries in the West, that we can only target Russia and at the same time spare the society is counterproductive to the discussion. Of course, why the society supports so strongly Russia is a different discussion. It's a mixture of nationalism, fear, hopelessness. Sometimes it's simply the drive for meaning. But we cannot assume at this point that we can win over the Russian people and make them change their regime. That's number 1. Second, we also need to understand that any economic or social considerations will always be secondary for Putin to political and geopolitical considerations. What does that mean? It means that sanctions will not deter Russia today to stop. They have a very important role. I would say we need more sanctions, but they are there to weaken the regime over the long term, to stop the war effort, to make it impossible for Russia to produce weapons. However, we also need to remember that Putin is determined to win this war, and I'll say in a moment why. And sanctions cannot be treated, as many think in the West, as the way to deter him. Yes? So let's be also realistic about the sanctions. We need more of them to cut financing of the regime, but they're not there to deter him, to make him go back. And last but not least, I think the decision in Russia was made, and it's very hard for many Western colleagues to accept. Putin has decided that his country is heading to self-isolation and self-dependence. He has made this decision back in 2014 with the counter-sanctions on food with the EU. In every policy he has taken since then in order to make sure that the oligarchs withdraw money from the West, he is preparing to closing down the country. And this is not driven by some power considerations, just like this entire war is not driven by power considerations. It is driven by the fear of the Russian domestic situation and that eventually the regime might collapse. So all in all, I think here in Poland, in Ukraine, in Baltic states, we are trying to say just one think. We cannot back down. We cannot stop. Russia is at war. It is at war not with Ukraine. It is at war with the West, with the entire democratic community. And it is also, thanks to the Ukrainian, weakened. If we stop, if we give him a ramp off, if we try to, make him save his face, then what is going to happen at the end of the day? That's only going to strengthen his domestic support. It's going to strengthen and give credibility to his policy. So it is a one-time opportunity for us to stop this.
Aaron, if I
Yes,
might
of course.
make
Yes.
a comment. I think it's important to reiterate the point that sanctions alone are not going to do this. Sanctions didn't work in North Korea. They didn't work in Iran. They didn't work in Syria. They didn't work in Venezuela. They didn't work in Cuba. So we are going to have to be creative about this, understand that they will only go so far, and that distance is a short one if we don't stay together. My concern is that at some point, as energy prices increase and the electorate becomes really strained with the cost of energy, that somehow this is going to fracture. Any fracturing of the sanctions as is will absolutely be disastrous. Somehow we must stay together, but we must realize that, to your point, sanctions will only go so far.
Thank you, Ambassador Mosbacher. That's great to be reminded of, that the Russian disinformation campaigns tend to rely on amplified divisions and fracture societies. And on that note, I would like to ask you, Marta, since you are a representative of Google, that wonderful, great American company, very quickly, what do you see as trends in Russian disinformation? I mean, if I was someone working at the Russian disinformation ministry, I would probably try to turn the Poles and Ukrainians against each other. That's what I would do. I mean, what I would do, I would resign, obviously, but if I had to be there, then that's what I would do. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing something else? Are they getting smarter, more creative?
And that is correct. And I think you don't need very advanced tools, be it from Google and YouTube, to be able to say what are the trends. And definitely polarization and incitement to hate or dislikement against Ukrainian refugees is a very serious concern. You see that on tech platforms, you see that in comment sections of the online outlets, and that is something many of us are looking into. The response from the tech companies' side has been unprecedented. Just at Google, since the start of the war, we removed more than 8,000 channels and over 60,000 videos that are that relate to that trend. And this work never stops. And disinformation, as such, is unfortunately not a new tool. It's pulled by different mechanisms at the moment. So I think there are also some positive trends that I'd like to talk about. So first of all, the prominence of the issue. We started talking about Russian disinformation in a more serious way than we did before February 24th. Then when you look and spotlight at Poland, there have been many lines that have been drawn. So the influence of Russian disinformation has been identified in the public debate, and thus kind of asked to leave from that debate. So we are now in the middle of the process, but I think some first lessons have been learned. The foundations remain the same. We need digital resilience. We need strong digital skills across the society. We need media literacy. There will be never one-stop solution that will solve disinformation at the technology level. If we solve that for platforms, they're going to find their own way, and the technology world is constantly changing. So this is about skills that applies to Poles and other societies of Central and Eastern Europe, as much as Ukrainian refugees who are now guests in our countries. So from where I sit, that's definitely one of the biggest concerns and one of the big priorities going forward.
Thank you. Any comment on that, or should we shift gears? Anyone want to say anything more on the...
I would say I think we need to realize that a lot of the Russian propaganda has been focused right now domestically. And I think we need to understand how that's building up the ideology of what we call Rashism, which can also be called postmodernist fascism, ideology of cynicism, because at the end of the day, you know, it has a lot of the core ideas of fascism, like, you know, nationalistic militarism, you know, cult of a leader, the complete diminution of political institution, liberal rights, and so on. But at the same time, it doesn't have any strong ideology. You know, it is an ideology of cynicism. Truth is not there. Truth is irrelevant, and so on. And Vladimir Putin has been preparing grounds for many, many years in Russia to this war. His support comes from the fact that the majority of Russians today truly believe that in Donbass, over the last 8 years, genocide, en masse genocide has been committed on Russian-speaking people. That's, of course, completely untrue. It has nothing to do with the facts, but the society lives in the illusion that they are the good guys, that they are actually helping the Russians which are being discriminated not only in Donbass, but also in Transnistria, in South Ossetia, in many other places. So this narrative has been, you know, floating around and can be used wherever Putin decides to use this. And there's not much we can do at this moment, apart from the realization of the fact that this is becoming a very strongly ideologized society without ideology. And this is extremely, extremely dangerous. I think we see this specifically for the intercepted communication of the Ukrainians, of the calls of Russian soldiers to their families. We see there's a complete dehumanization of Ukrainians. Women saying, yes, you can rape, you can kill, well, that's normal, they have to suffer, we should erase Ukraine from the ground. I'm not saying that all Russians think that way, but I think there's enough of Russians that think that way that gives the regime the ability not only to survive, but to proceed with a long-term war in Ukraine. And here again, the strength of Russian domestic propaganda, which was probably the strongest throughout the last years, is critical.
Thank you.
If I might, I don't think we should underestimate hybrid warfare. And I don't think it's just focused on the war that's going on now. No, we have spent a lot of time, money, intellect on building our conventional armies and for conventional warfare, the 12,000 American troops that are on the ground now here in Poland. But this is a new age, the age of technology. The fake AI, etc. I am not sure, and I'm concerned, that we haven't spent as much time and effort on understanding this hybrid warfare and creating the tools, one, to recognize it, two, to recognize it before it takes hold, and three, how do we fight it? And that will be a certain set of tools, and we'll need to use the negative part of a hybrid warfare, which is technology. We need to take technology and use it for the positive fight against hybrid warfare. And I think we're being more reactive in that respect than we are being proactive in getting Silicon Valley to start to focus on really how we fight this in the same way we thought of fighting conventional war.
Thank you. Given that we're bumping up the end, I would really like to, shift to more of a positive story. And touching on what you just said, Ambassador Mosbach, let me go back to you, Martha, then, because, in many ways, as far as the digital technology sphere goes, Poland and other countries in Central and Eastern Europe are often seen as being ahead of Western European countries, and indeed maybe ahead of the United States in some respects. Correct me if I'm wrong here. So, given that, how can Poland play a role in making sure that the voices in these countries are being heard in Brussels and in Washington? What do you say about that?
Thank you. I wish the dominance of Poland and seeing the technology sphere was true in all measurements. We still have to catch up in so many different areas, and that's a natural state of affairs given historical reasons. And for the same historical reasons, at the same time, this region builds an amazing momentum for the development of digital economy. Lack of legacy industries makes us build faster, be more brave and open to fintech, to online banking, to many different solutions that are still not as developed as here in other Western European countries or in the US. For sure, this region is a great home to US tech companies. It's also a land of a number of fascinating tech companies, solutions, startups, and at Google we're very excited about the future of this region. So I truly believe that this is the path forward, and that takes me finally to the moment when I can say how grateful I am and happy I am that Atlantic Council is coming back again. And to what Ambassador Mosbacher just said, this alliance between Poland and the US is exactly the right platform to talk about looking for solutions. What we're currently very worried about at Google globally is fragmentation of the internet, fragmentations of solutions, and you can think about the extremes, about Russia, but you need to also see where the overall European Union is. That doesn't always look at security aspects of some of the regulations that is being introduced, while this part of the world has this understanding. That's why we're very hopeful about that debate being live within the Atlantic Council community, within the 3 Cs initiative. And to your point about that voice and position being recognized, I think we're all participating in that venture today. It's a big challenge to turn momentum into a real opportunity and into impact, and I think that's where we are. That's where we are all today in the region. The past weeks certainly brought back not only the Atlantic Council office, but also the spotlight back to the region, and it's going to be incredibly difficult, but also important to institutionalize as much as we can. Atlantic Council is institutionalizing today. In the reverse exercise, we just saw the Polish Institute of Foreign Affairs reopen their office in Washington, D.C., and we need more of those platforms to carry on conversations, to carry on the spirit that is coming out of the debate we're having now, and I just hope that this whole potential will not go to waste.
Thank you. We have about 5 more minutes, and since you touched on the 3 Cs, I mean, question to literally everyone on the panel. I mean, I'm looking at you, Georgette, because you talk about the 3 Cs, but so what is the true potential of the 3 Cs initiative? Personally, I'm a huge fan of the 3 Cs initiative, but tell everybody why we should think about it, and is it important that the U.S. make do on its commitment in the investment fund?
I think it's critical that the U.S. Literally live up to their commitment, because, first of all, the 3 Cs is a unique private sector, public sector initiative. The big problems today, the real challenges in the world, will not be solved by the private sector or the public sector. We will have to work together. I think good point with respect to technology, Google. We are going to have to work together to come up with solutions for this. The 3 Cs has 3 pillars: energy, transportation, and digital. And if we can't put the infrastructure together in the 12 countries of the 3 Cs, bring it up to the standards of the West. It's not just a matter of national security, but it's also a matter of being competitive. This is a very competitive world. This is a world economy. There's no more, there are no more borders when it comes to services, and we're going to have to be competitive. And to be competitive, you're going to have the infrastructure to do that. The 3 Cs is that opportunity to make that investment, along with, and uniquely, because you have government, 3 Cs governments, willing to partner with the private sector, giving the private sector really that guarantee to make that investment. But without it, you will continue to slip backwards. And you can't afford that. And because today is competitive, no matter what corner of the world, it's competition. And we are now seeing played out so, unfortunately, so dramatically, the whole idea that energy is national security, but the EU was asleep for the last 10 years. I mean, the fact that we had to fight over Nord Stream 2, it should never have happened in the first place. One, it was never a business issue. It was always a security issue. And Russia knew it. And Germany played along with them. We have to understand that we no longer can have these conversations. We're going to close down your nuclear facilities, but yet you want to get to carbon neutral in 20 years? That's a fantasy. And who is telling the truth about this? I mean, you can stand up there and you can say, we have to do this. We have to save the planet. Well, it's hard to save the planet if people are starving to death, right? So you can't be saving the planet and freezing in the dark where your factories close down. So somehow there's got to be a realistic approach to this. And finally, it took a war for the EU to change their policy of LNG and nuclear. A war. I mean, that's pretty, to me, that's astonishing. The failure of the leadership and policies that got us here. This should never have happened. Putin should never have had this leverage. And now we're scrambling in order to keep the lights on? This is 2022. We have to now step up, work with technology, come together, and be realistic about the goals that we have in terms of climate, but at the same time have realistic solutions to get us there. It's not just, we're not going to wave a wand. We're not going to have, what's her name, Thunberg, what's her name, the girl that...
Greta.
Greta. We're not going to have Greta standing up there saying, I don't care, do it. That's fine, it's wonderful, do it. But that doesn't get us anywhere. The truth is, we need energy. And energy requires planning, and this war has literally been the neon sign that said, where have you been? What have you been thinking? You missed the point in your rush to be energy, to be carbon neutral. We all want to be carbon neutral. But there is a process of reality. And we're facing it now with Russia.
And on that, well, Ambassador Fried, in 30 seconds, how do we keep everybody awake and not fall asleep again, if you can?
The Russian military effort is in trouble. We were talking about defense, especially in the disinformation sphere. Fair enough. I'm sensing opportunities. Russians, if I remember the Soviet Union, and I'm old enough to remember the Soviet Union, the Russians are perfectly capable of two levels of thought: defending the policy and understanding that something has gone very wrong. I'm getting the sense, and you can sense from afar, from Warsaw and even from Washington, that they know things have not gone well. Let us think of not our own disinformation, we're no good at it and we shouldn't try, but our own information. At some point in the 1980s, and I'm looking at you, Janusz Onyszkiewicz, at some point in the 1980s, we started going on offense. And the results were pretty good, right? We need to start thinking in those terms with respect to Russia. Regime change is not our policy. It shouldn't be our policy. But it might be a bonus if you get everything else right. Think about offense. Think about helping the Ukrainian people. And as far as energy goes, yeah, that's right. You're right. And so Piotr Naimski and the Polish government can take a moment. You know, they had one day where they got to say they didn't care what Putin did with the gas because they were ready. One day that took 10 years or more to prepare.
Right.
Okay?
Here.
Nice policy. And it was policy of this government and the previous one. Solid policy that survived politics. Good job. That's what we need. Anyway, Aaron, you said wrap it up. So you've now heard all the issues you're going to be diving into in Poland. Good luck, man.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Danfrey. Thank you, Ambassador Mosbar. Thank you, Katarzyna Pisarska. Thank you, Marta
Aaron,
Poczlak.
before we close, I think it's important because we made a point earlier today that this office and being in Poland, here in Warsaw with the Atlantic Council, is only because we have Mr. Groszak and Mr. Solarz, Poles that have invested in making this happen. And without that, this doesn't happen.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That concludes our panel.